after the budget and make sure that the bureaucracy, the civil service is well managed, was given responsibility for managing this open government initiative. Just to give you an idea of the data involved, this particular project since 2009 has placed on websites, in a single website actually, over 455,000 databases. And there are now around 1,300 government applications to analyze those, and there are semantic web features to all of these, and there are communities of practice oriented around these databases. And just recently the United States government announced that it was sharing all of this platform information and techniques and lessons learned with the government of India, who is going to copy it. Now, not too long ago, there was some evaluations of how well this open data, open government thing was working. Now, bear in mind that the United States has a lot of agencies, and they each were required to do this open government initiative policy. So what happened was when researchers looked at this, they discovered that each agency was doing it differently, and it ranged from not doing it at all to doing it really well. Interestingly, the Office of Management and Budget, which I just mentioned was the manager of this whole process, was rated as the worst agency for implementation of this open government initiative. Many people felt that the open government initiative was not something that the public service truly believed in, but that they were simply complying with a president's order. And so concerns for quality, relevance, and efficiency were not of much concern. But the idea that you could tick a box, as we say in Australia, and get credit for this was what they were mainly worried about. The White House, President Obama's staff gave this order on the first day that he took office to create an open government, but no one had written guidance and standards for how they were going to do that. So there was a year or two of great confusion about what that actually meant. Some of the real interesting things that would be useful to citizens are something called the Inspector General reports. The Inspector General is a independent civil service in each of the agencies, and they look for fraud, waste, and abuse and other kinds of bad management practices. And those reports were buried very deeply into websites so that you had to actually know where they were to find them. So citizens were not able to find these things. Similarly, the justifications for programs and agencies with respect to the budget were not easy to find either. So you could find the numbers of dollars spent on different things, but you couldn't find out why it was that they had chosen those amounts in the first place. The responsible officers in each program and agency were not listed, or their website emails and things of that sort were inoperable. So the very people responsible for figuring out whether this worked were not engaged in doing that. The web pages for the Open Government Initiative were not integrated within the agency's general website, so it's kind of hard to find where they were and what they were doing. The public was misperceived as having a lot of tools available to analyze all this data, but it turns out that you had to have a very high level of sophistication to do it, so it was very limiting in that respect. And then finally, the data that the government put on its websites tended to be outdated, and as most of you know, most government data is outdated when it's produced just because it takes a long time to gather, but these were even older than that, so much of the data was not particularly useful for a lot of things. Okay, so the Obama administration has straightened out most of the things that I mentioned over the last 2 years, so it is functioning much better. But here's some issues to think about in the e-government space. One of the big ones is that the IT side of the IT side of government, civil service reform and management and performance management assumes that the government is a well-functioning operation where you can actually come up with IT solutions to model all these processes under. But that turns out not to be quite the case. For example, under the Bush administration with their performance management system, I mentioned that it was running for 6 years. After 6 years, they still hadn't gotten the enterprise architecture features of that codified so that it would operate. So it's still operating for the most part outside IT solutions. And so that, that defeats the whole purpose of the power of IT if you can't actually model what's going on in these different areas. Sustainability, as I mentioned, is a huge issue. It's not only an issue across administrations where when one president replaces another, they tend to change everything. But in this particular case, with e-government, the architects of the entire e-government framework under Obama left after just 1 year. And he basically left the system in disarray because he had spent so much effort building it and everybody was focused on him, and then he simply walked away. We don't know why that is, but it may be that he thought he needed more resources and wasn't given those. As I mentioned before, IT still, unfortunately, is not well integrated into other management and planning activities across ministries. So this means that it sits by itself, and when that happens, you tend to get IT solutions that don't fit with what management wants, and management tends not to be able to say to IT, this is what we would like, and so you have this disconnect between those two. And so unfortunately IT is sitting separately, and that's the way it's been for 10 or 15, 20 years anyway, so it's a big problem. Return on investment is a huge issue here. The problem with it is that we've got all of these IT solutions, but we don't know how much money they're saving or creating. And then another one that's interesting is generational barriers. Generational barriers are huge. In the IT area, you have older people who are managing the IT function, and they're not as sophisticated in terms of their skills as the younger generation. So we have a lot of problems with organizational culture.
Sorry to interrupt. We have just a few minutes left. Then we'll open it for the Q&A.
Okay,
thanks.
Okay, so the solution to all of this is don't do all the things I just talked about if they're negative, but the main ones are that we need commitment from top-level leadership. We need managers and policymakers that actually know how to do this stuff. We need consensus among stakeholders. We need civil service buy-in, and we need to really take seriously change management, because we have huge organizational cultural issues at play that need to be addressed. So my final statement is, am I feeling negative about this whole thing? The answer is no. I think we're making actually great progress, particularly considering where we started. And I think that as we go through this in different countries, we learn more and more about how to make it better. So I'm pretty positive about the results. So that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. Folks, now we are open for the question and answers. If you have a question, you can raise your hand. There's a hand icon available on your webinar console. So if you raise your hand, I'll be able to give you a chance to speak up directly with Dr. Bass, or you could equally post your questions in the chat box, which I've already observed a lot of them have posted. So, but I would like to give you an opportunity to speak up also. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. Meanwhile, let me move to the question box. There's a question from Brother Ahmed. How misunderstood is the concept that e-government is about the use of technology rather than a change management drive?
I think it needs to be both. Usually, it's seen as making government more efficient and effective, those kinds of things. But in fact, if IT that underlay that is doing its job, it will move the government to more progress and more advancement over time, rather than maintaining a static level. So most of the things like enterprise architecture, for example, what they do is they say, this is what a process looks like now, and this is where we want to move in the future. So I think it has to do both, but it's not doing a lot of the advancement into the future as it has the potential to do.
Okay, good. There's another one. In one of the slides, you mentioned organizational performance is linked to a really change in the budget allocation. Why do you think it happened?
Why do I think the linkage between the three happened or didn't happen? I couldn't hear.
Yeah, why do you think it happened? Basically, the organizational performance didn't link it. I mean, it wasn't linked to a change in any budget allocation.
Okay. The short answer is that members of Parliament or members of Congress are attached to their programs, and if you hold them accountable by reducing the budget for those programs, what they'll do is they will attack your program when they get a chance, and so everybody will be going after everyone else's program, and that's not a good thing. So what tends to happen is policymakers and elected officials focus on programs that they want to be experts in or that they like, and they don't tend to mess around with other people's programs. So as a result of that, it's very hard to change the system. This is why in many countries it's very hard to get rid of any kind of program or any kind of ministry, because there's so much vested interest and stakeholder activity that it just doesn't happen. Now, the Bush administration actually tried to overcome this, and they created all of the systems and data to make those decisions, but Congress didn't have the will to carry through. So as a result of that, there was this massively large performance management system and budgeting system which really didn't do very much.
Okay, okay. Another one from Brother Amar Bolili. Is the open source of OGI a good start for any government like Egypt to build on, or where to start from?
Yeah, I think the open source software, and we also call it open technology, and to some extent open government, is a great thing for countries to focus on, particularly countries that are developing or trying to progress. And the reason for that is that the open source software gives you a lot of flexibility.